Hello, in today's video we're going to look at some of the do's and don'ts of landscape photography. It's not your usual kind of landscape photography tutorial, but we're going to go just that little bit deeper. After last week's video with Charlie Waite, he inspired me in so many ways. It was fascinating seeing his approach and actually quite encouraging that it wasn't too dissimilar from my own. The feeling we get as landscape photographers, being out in nature and then bringing a little piece of it home in our cameras, is incredibly uplifting, and more people should experience that. Having seen the master at work, in contrast then, how do we begin? What are the fundamentals? What's important on our landscape photography journey from the very first landscape photograph that we take to actually being stood there in front of Charlie's tree? In the pursuit of any goal, it's easy to get carried away with the tide or to get bogged down. And every now and again, it's very useful to just remind ourselves of the hows and the whys as to what we're doing. It's this that can create a mindfulness that's just so useful and was so beautifully demonstrated on the video last week by Charlie. So whether you're a complete beginner or a seasoned professional, let's have a look at a few things that matter and a few that don't in our pursuit of great landscape photographs. If you were to spend a lot of time out there in internet land, it would be very easy to believe that the main thing that matters in photography is the gear. The magazines, the blogs, the videos are full of it. It's absolutely everywhere, but it's just absolutely not the case. Fundamentally, the gear does not matter. The first time I considered myself to be doing landscape photography was about 22 years ago, almost to the day, when I was 16 years old and lucky enough to travel to Yosemite National Park in the US. Now, driving around there, I had planned to take some pictures and had picked up a little Kodak disposable camera that was armed with panoramic film. It was cheap, it was fun, and I had to wait weeks before I saw the images, but I am really happy with what I came away with, and I still think they stand up today. Having said that though, and in slight contradiction, the gear does matter. If you see the gear as more of a tool rather than photography itself, that can be very useful. If you have gear that is decent quality, is reliable, you know is weather sealed for landscape photography, you can just remove those concerns, that distraction that gear can cause sometimes, so you can just focus on being creative and produce the images that you want to produce. My main gear requirements for landscape photography are just the camera. I want a focal range from about 16mm up to about 200. That would be a 10mm at the low end if it was a cropped sensor camera. A tripod can also be useful, but that's really all I need to just start to get out there and do some landscape photography. Number two is that other photographers just don't matter. It was Theodore Roosevelt that said that comparison is the thief of joy. And that's true probably today more so than ever before, as we're so sort of overwhelmed with information from the internet, and we can see what every single person is doing. Every single second we spend comparing ourselves to somebody else is just a complete waste of time, and it's almost certain to leave you feeling inadequate. We spend a terrible amount of time worrying about what other people think of us and what other people are doing, and it leads to thoughts of fear and of jealousy, and it can result in some truly awful behaviour. Whether that's kind of openly mean and awful, or probably worse sometimes is when people get very passive aggressive. That's not to say though that we shouldn't pay attention to other photographers. We absolutely should, because it will make us better. Surround yourself with positive people, celebrate their work, support them, revel in their success, use their fire to feed your own. Next up is don't worry about the location that you're shooting. We all might have a list of the top places that we want to go to. That's totally normal. But it's not the location that makes the photographer. It's the other way around. Some of my favourite landscape photographers are those that have made a local area their own. They've explored it, they know it inside out, and they've managed to develop a relationship with that land that lets them capture unique and intimate images. Granted, it's a lot easier for people with a national park right on their doorstep, but for the rest of us it means that we've got to travel, and with travel comes a lot of preparation and planning, so it's very often much easier to go to locations where you know there is going to be a great shot, where there's a famous location, and you should not be ashamed in any way of shooting that. I do. I shoot those top-notch locations because I love it, and almost always I'll find something extra or different to shoot as well. Next up is getting the shot does not matter. I'm completely guilty of not following this advice because I put a lot of pressure on myself, especially when I'm filming a vlog, to get some good images. But the truth of it is that getting the shot doesn't really matter. And it's one of the things that really struck me with spending time with Charlie last week, when he said that if the light is not right, he will just walk away and potentially come back another day. Now, I would never walk away from a scene without taking an image, and that was the same last week. But I think there is a lot to be said for having that level of patience, enjoying your time in the landscape, and understanding that not every trip is going to yield a top-notch photograph. I actually think it's a really healthy approach to landscape photography because it can be very frustrating. We can look at this as purely a numbers game. Say when you first start going out, you might come away with one good shot every 10 trips out. Those other 9, though, are still valuable experiences, though, because you're scouting, you're exploring, you're increasing your knowledge of an area and a landscape. The more we then practice and the more we plan around the weather, our yield will then increase. And what you'll find is that what also follows is that the quality of your actual images increases with that. We then look back over the year, and you might have 12 that are absolute keepers, say 15 that are decent, and then an additional 30 that are learning experiences that you can take into the next year. Now let's move on to the do's. So do work on the technical skills. I spend a lot of time encouraging people to focus less on the technical skills and more on the artistic side, because the technical aspect of photography gets a lot of coverage. However, it is vitally important. Mastering your camera is a critical part of becoming a good photographer. You want that camera to become an extension of you. So you know exactly how it works, exactly what it does, and you can just remove that concern from your artistic workflow. This technical learning process, though, is enjoyed and it should be fun. Discovering new techniques like using depth of field creatively, or long exposure, or intentional camera movement is exciting because it gives us motivation to continue getting out there. It's why I created the Landscape Photography Masterclass, to provide that information that you would normally get on a tour when you're paying more than £1,000, but you got that for less than £100. I'm now taking that a step further, and I'm very excited to announce that this week I have launched the Raw Room. It's an online platform that provides brand new tutorials. At launch, there are 40 videos with over 10 hours worth of content. It's also going to go way beyond landscape photography as we delve into everything from wedding photography to water drop photography. There's also live one-to-one critiques. There are vlog editing videos where you can download a raw file and have a go at editing that picture yourself. There's loads more on there, including offers and discounts and Lightroom presets. And I'm also really happy to announce that the entire Landscape Photography Masterclass will be on there for you as well. Just head over to firstmanphotography.com/rawroom or hit the link down below and you can get started in a matter of minutes, and you can get it all for just £5.99 per month, and you can cancel at any time. Now, years ago, somebody gave me probably the best piece of advice I've ever had for my photography, and that's to invest in your photography. To be good at any pursuit, you need an investment of money, of time, and commitment, an emotional investment into what you're doing. Clearly, your budget dictates your financial investment, and that's usually trying to find a balance between gear, travel, education, that kind of thing. But much more important, I think, is the investment of your time. We all lead busy lives, don't we? And by some distance, time is your biggest asset. Finding time to do photography can be extremely challenging. Every second we do find, though, will benefit us. And it's probably more rewarding and more fulfilling than spending every night watching TV. It also requires an emotional investment. This can be a bit more tricky to figure out sometimes, but by committing yourself and placing a high priority in your life to doing photography will really benefit you along the way. For many of us, it becomes an absolute passion, and we can draw on all of our life experience to put that into our photographs and really put a personal stamp on our work. Another passion for landscape photographers should be a love of nature. If you don't have a passion for nature, then you're going to find doing landscape photography almost an impossible challenge. Now and again, I get emails from people telling me that they don't know where to go to find great landscapes. Developing a love of nature and the outdoors is absolutely the best way to deal with this. And by getting out as often as possible, exploring, having a look around, you'll soon develop that deeper understanding of the landscape. And that will allow you to then see the beauty that's there and make that into a picture. Also, leave your car behind. Go for a walk. Even places that look fairly mundane, sometimes just a 5 or a 10-minute walk away from the road will reveal some truly magnificent landscapes. Too many of us lead cozy and comfortable lives, and I'm way too guilty of this. I slip into it far too easily, so I'm constantly having to remind myself to do more, essentially. My landscape photography benefits every time I push myself. Every time I go outside of my comfort zone by traveling to a new location, working with a new photographer, or wild camping, something like that. The more I do, the more my comfort zone expands, and I know that's a great indication that I'm growing as a person. And almost always, without fail, the quality of my work will then follow that. You can even do very simple things to push yourself outside of your comfort zone by doing other genres of photography. I know a lot of you do this, but try some portrait photography or macro photography, because by doing that and upping your shutter count, your photography will benefit from that across the board. Challenging yourself also builds resilience. So when things go wrong in any walk of life, you become more capable of dealing with it rationally. I genuinely believe that if every single person would climb a mountain just once in their life, the world would be a better place. Next up is that you absolutely should print and share your work. As you saw in the video last week, Charlie Waite is particularly fond of his little sayings, and one of my favourite that he has is that the print is the photograph's rightful inheritance. Printing out work that you have created is a special thing, because at that point it becomes something more tangible, something more relevant, and more interesting in a world where billions of images exist online. It becomes a piece of artwork that displays the passion, the care, the effort that that photographer has put into creating that piece of work. I cover the full printing process in the masterclass, but I've started to think about actually making the print at the time of shooting the image in the field. And it's a really great tip to hone your mind and hone your composition so it slows you down, so you can then make the absolute most of the scene that's there in front of you. I'll leave you with this thought. It's never easy for any artist to put themselves out there into the world, because any artistic endeavour includes a certain level of self-criticism and self-doubt. Imagine though if the greats like Ansel Adams, or living legends like Charlie Waite and Joe Cornish had kept it all to themselves and not shared their work. Where would we be then? As you saw in the video last week, they're no different to you or to me. And you never know, you might be great. Let others be the judge.